next. Welcome, everybody, to Crossing the Line with Greg Heym. And this week, Scott Nadler. What's up, buddy, from CrossCountry Mortgage? The guy, if you need a mortgage.
Yes.
Even if you don't, call him. He's a really cool guy. You hang out with him. It's you talk about all kinds of cool things.
Happy to chat.
Well, it's season 2, episode 2. But more important, this is our 50th episode.
I was going to say, this is the 50th.
Ray, what do you give someone for their 50th podcast episode? Is there a special kind of gift? A bobble, another bobble. Ron Guidry has been lonely. Or maybe I should just grow up and not use it anymore. But it's Gator, man.
Did you see the movie Along Came Polly?
A long time ago.
There's a scene in it. Ben Stiller and Jennifer Aniston's character, they get intimate for the first time. And Ben Stiller, trying to last as long as possible, counts. And he gets to 50 and just yells out 50. And then they just start yelling 50 to each other. I mean, this is a monumental episode.
I remember a scene in the movie Singles where a similar thing happens and the guy thinks about Xavier McDaniel. But anyway, Xavier McDaniel,
former Nick.
I think he was the first player to lead the NCAA in scoring and rebounding.
Interesting.
Known for his time with the Supersonics,
yes,
which Singles was Seattle-based, like Eddie Vedder's in the movie. Today is January 13th, and I have to mention today's my brother Chris's birthday. Last week was my dad's birthday, they're a week apart. My brother Chris actually born on Friday the 13th. So that does explain a lot.
It does,
You may be wondering, does it? Yeah, it does. So happy birthday, Chris. You don't even watch, so I'll have to tell you I said it. The weekend was good. It was
good. Actually went to the Knicks game yesterday. Speaking of the Knicks.
Now, they got trounced twice in a week by the OKC.
They got a win yesterday.
And then they went in and they took care of
We are looking
Giannis.
forward. They took care of Giannis yesterday.
Now, what was the gasping like when Brunson left the court? Because I know on TV they're like, uh-oh.
See, a lot of people didn't even realize.
Oh, really?
Yeah, a lot of people in our section had no idea, and then we realized. And then
because Payne came in and started throwing up threes.
He was playing great, and we were also up 20. But I will say, when he came back, it was like Willis Reed coming back.
Only healthy. Like Willis, I saw
the garden erupted. So, yeah.
As big a Ranger fan,
a much needed win for sure.
As big a Ranger fan I am, there's nothing like a Knick game at the Garden, particularly a playoff game. It is so much louder.
It was a lot of fun
than anything you can experience. It's great. You know, they can't beat OKC, but most people can't. So we'll just hope someone knocks them off before we get to the conference finals.
The NBA finals.
The NBA finals, I mean. Yeah, we just got to worry about Boston and Cleveland. Cleveland doesn't like to lose either. They took OKC out the other day.
They did. They're looking very, very good.
Well, I had a gig on Friday, which went okay.
Why just okay, Greg?
Crowd could have been better.
You're blaming the crowd?
Yes. I showed up. Why didn't they show up? Well, I got paid to show up, but why didn't they show up? Not this owner, but sometimes, you know, when you're asking for a gig or mentioning, you know, asking you looking for music, first question a lot of places say, how many people do you bring? So I travel in a huge bus. I bring 50. I mean, my wife will come. I can get some friends there. And the rule of thumb is your first gig in a new place, everybody you know shows up, and it's packed and it's great. Then they expect that every time. But this owner's not. He gets it. You know, it was a much better crowd than he would have had without the music. And I think that's all we can really offer. Plus, any money I get paid goes right back to the house after I pay for my wife and my son and whoever else is there's meals. So, but it was a good show.
What was your best set?
My partner sounds a lot like Roy Orbison. Sometimes exactly like. So when we do You Got It or Pretty Woman or Blue Bayou, people, he's got that Irish tenor voice that just seems to scream Roy Orbison for some reason. And that was a lot of fun. We tried some.
And you don't sing at all.
No.
Maybe that's what the audience wanted.
Maybe. But once they hear it, they may not want it. I can sing. My voice is just too low for most rock. If we're ever going to do some Barry White, I'm your guy.
Interesting.
Actually, I was at a jazz thing and a table had requested Sweet Caroline, and there's nothing jazz people hate more than getting a song like that. So that no one would sing it. So I said to my guitar teacher, who's the leader of the trio, what are you going to do? Because I'm going to play the instrumental. I go, no, you're not. And I grabbed the microphone and I sang it. And then I got back to the table, some jazz musicians that I know, like, wait a minute, where did that come from? I'm like, I can sing. I just don't do it. I could fake Neil Diamond. I'm a New York guy.
Okay.
Like him. Anyhow, what we hear about? Oh, economics. That's right. Well, we're coming to you as always from Studio 1873, newly decorated, new furniture.
Beautiful.
First show, new furniture. Don't mess it up. We'll get in trouble. Ray doesn't like that. But as always, wonderfully decorated by our good buddies at the Everset.
Here at Studio 1873 is brought to you by the Everset. The Everset provides full-service staging and furniture rental solutions in the New York area. For more information, please visit us at staging.theeverset.com or email us at staging@theeverset.com to request a free proposal.
All right, we're back. Today, we're going to focus on the December jobs report because it was...
Do we have to?
It's certainly not going to be as fun as what we talked about at the beginning, but, I don't know if it can top the Knicks. But yes, because we said last week that this was going to be the thing where we were going to look for, and it better not come in much higher than expected because that would be bad news for stocks and real estate. And as I said in the beginning of my blog, another month, another better than expected jobs report. And, it's why are we surprised?
Yeah.
Why we just keep getting surprised because, and you mentioned this last week, we talk about a tale of two economies or the real Slim Shady.
The real Slim Shady.
For you Gen Zers out there, even though.
Gen Xers.
Yeah, he's my age.
Exactly.
A little richer than me and more famous, but not much. No, I don't get paid for this.
He doesn't have the voice that you have, though.
He has a better voice. That's why people pay a lot of money to listen to it. I don't rap very well either. So December report comes out, 256,000 jobs added, 100,000 more than expected. All you got to do is see that come across whatever feed you get your news from or, and say, oh, crap. Like that's exactly what we do not want. The largest gain since March of last year. It's like, that's not good either. And we always say that we always want to take a deeper dive into the data to see if maybe there's something here that is a one-off or maybe something that doesn't make sense and we're going to get into basically without making it a real like scholarly lesson, like how Greg Heym looks at it and Scott Nadler look at these reports. Because the report itself, I wanted to get the exact number of pages right, is like 40-something pages. And there's enough data in here to put you to sleep for weeks. I mean, honestly, when you think about it, because it's 42 pages, the actual release. And we're going to go through no, we're not going to. But, people will start with the headline number. It's the title and what's there.
And this report, by the way, was eerily similar to the December report from 2024 as well. Or 2023, I should say. And what's that Mark Twain quote? That history doesn't repeat itself, but it often does rhyme. I think it's Mark Twain.
Sounds like something he would say.
It seems like this report was kind of spot on to where it was a year ago as well, which is really interesting.
I was watching The Big Short yesterday, and there was a Twain quote in there. It's something like what's dangerous is not what you know, but what you're sure of that isn't.
Right.
Like that's, the thing. So, yeah, Mark Twain.
He was good, Mark Twain.
Yeah. He had a sense of humor, too, about it's reports of his death being exaggerated.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, we get these reports and, some people think that there's motivation by some people to make the economy look better than it is. That wouldn't make sense right now because we're kind of in between a transition that will begin next week. Hopefully that's said the correct way. Thank you, Ray. So I don't know. I've said numerous times here, I used to work at BLS. I wasn't aware. They were accused of doing it 30-something years ago. I don't know if there's some mass conspiracy to help whoever is in office or, whoever is saying whatever they're saying. I think the problem is you're talking about December potentially being a problem. That smells more like teen spirit. No, it smells more like seasonal adjustments. The data is seasonally adjusted because there are certain months of the year where hiring picks up for various reasons.
Right.
Think about summer hiring. lifeguards, stuff like that. In December, retail hiring. Now, retail, we'll give the breakdown in a minute. Retail did incredibly well after a loss of jobs in November. Do their models need to be adjusted? There's a lot of estimating that goes on, and, they look at the stuff and they get re-benchmarked. Plus, for example, I do a market report. There are always deeds that show up days or weeks or sometimes a month or longer after the quarter ends. And that changes the numbers. So that's why we revise our numbers. You won't really know the fourth quarter numbers until you get the first quarter report when the other numbers are finalized.
Right.
That's why GDP, they take 3 cracks at it.
But then, Greg, look at these store closures that we've been seeing. We talked about this on a previous episode, but I can pull up. Party City closed 850 stores. Big Lots, 580 stores. Family Dollar, 700 stores. CVS closed 900 stores. Walgreens closed 1,200 stores. 7-Eleven closed 492 stores. And there's a whole list here.
Right.
And this is just in 2024. So it's hard to make sense of this robust economy when you're seeing data like that.
Well, the economy doesn't, all sectors don't always move at the same time at the same pace. So, we talked about a lot of these numbers being inflated by government hiring and industries tied directly to government that have nothing to do with what's going on with the economy.
Right.
Like healthcare. Healthcare is supported tremendously by the government, Medicare, Medicaid. So I think that we have to keep that in mind. The adjustments that get made. COVID took those adjustments already hard to make and made them even harder. Even the seasonality of the housing market isn't what it used to be. I mean, we're back sort of on that pattern, but there are things that can throw a monkey wrench into your whole adjustment process. And that's why when things are re-benchmarked, 9 months later or a year later, you go, wow, why is that so different? Because they have all the data now. And this is the same reason why the personal consumption expenditures price index is a better indicator of inflation than CPI. Mm-hmm. It comes out 2 weeks later. It has more complete data in it. It can adjust for changes in spending. And I think, we have 3 surveys that we look to for jobs, right? One is ADP, which comes out like Wednesday.
Which is something I wanted to talk to you about as well.
Well, talk about it now if you want, or if you want to wait.
So the ADP report comes out on Wednesday before
right.
the Friday jobs report. Neela Richardson, who we were talking about earlier, she's the head economist for ADP. And on Wednesday, she was talking about weaknesses in the economy. That she was seeing a lot of challenges in the labor market, specifically for 2025. That was 2 days before this report comes out, showing 100,000 more jobs are created than were estimated. ADP, the report itself, showed more jobs were created than the estimate itself. I think they estimated around 120,000 and 144,000 jobs came out through ADP. In terms of ADP, they end up surveying more people through ADP than the BLS does, correct?
I'm looking right now. Yeah. The payroll data is on more than 25 million U.S. employees. Now, how does ADP get access to the data? Most companies or a lot of companies use it as a payroll provider. Right. So they have that information. One of the things people may not realize is the BLS that does the jobs numbers, CPI, PPI, stuff like that, it's voluntary. The fun part about being in New York, too, is the high refusal rate. You call up and say, hey, I'm from the Department of Labor. We're calculating statistics on wages and hiring, and it's click. It's other parts of the country, they're a lot nicer. But, and especially now that the data is electronic, when I was at BLS in the early 90s, we still got paper, reams and reams of paper. Then we had to manually enter into really archaic computers using dial-up, modems in our hotel rooms, because it was you were a field economist back then. So, and ADP is only looking at private sector. That's another thing. They're not looking at the government hiring, which has led hiring so many of these months we see as government. So
which isn't doing much for the overall economy itself.
Yeah, no, it's and it's wonky. Like, who knows if Doge really becomes a popular thing, then that number could shrink.
Correct.
And it's hard to people say, I don't know which one to believe. But the one thing, whether you looked at ADP or the payroll survey, which is what's used for the headline number, or the household survey, remember we always talk about, so payroll survey, which is a survey of about 120,000 businesses each month, which is conducted, by the way, in the middle of the month because they have to tabulate all the data. So if something happens in the second half of the month, it's not going to capture that until the following month when those numbers are revised. That gives us how many jobs are created. That gives us the data on wages. What we call the household survey, which is calling Scott Nadler and ask him 2 questions. Are you working? And if he answers no, you ask him if he's looking for work, because you're not unemployed if you're not looking. That gives us the unemployment rate. Those are the main uses of each survey. And one of the reasons they do that by calling people is the payroll survey can count Scott twice if he's working 2 jobs. And there's no differentiation between part-time and full-time workers. It's just how many people are working, how big is your payroll.
And in the economy that we're in right now, where you have a lot of gig workers, people working for an Uber or teaching yoga on the side, there's a lot of people that can do that right now.
Well, and not just that, a lot of people need that second job because inflation has been the only thing we say it every month, it seems, the only prices that are going down are energy prices. We'll get the CPI and PPI reports this week, and we'll see what they say. But, prices, we could talk about how inflation is eased. All that means is prices aren't going up as much as they used to.
Right.
So you do see more people working multiple jobs. But in these 42 pages of this report are breakdowns upon breakdowns upon breakdowns of how many people are working part-time for economic reasons, and then looking at unemployment rates for every demographic. It's a world of information. And it keeps you very busy when you're trying to write, a vlog or do a podcast to try to keep up with this. But the one thing that we have noticed recently is, look, these 3 surveys are never going to all be in step. We should be suspicious if they are, because that's an accident. Again, the payroll survey can double count people if they're working multiple jobs. The household survey is not going to do that. But the household survey is much smaller. So the sampling becomes an even greater part of that number. ADP, I don't know what percentage of the people in this country they pay, or if it's skewed towards certain industries or not. That could also be something. Here in New York and everywhere there's real estate, companies put out market reports. And people have different methodologies for how they do those reports. So all the firms release their reports and the media goes, why are they all different? Shouldn't they all be the same? Like, well, some people don't count certain types of sales. Some people have different boundaries for neighborhoods. It really depends on how you accumulate your data and any adjustments you might make to it. So getting back to the headline and why this was such a devastating... Okay, I'm sorry. I'll wait.
I was just going to say, what does the everyday person, what are they supposed to make of this? Because they don't have time to go through 42 pages of this report, let alone probably...
They haven't tried it yet. They could make time. Look, I had a finance professor in an advanced investment analysis class in grad school who used to say, particularly to me when she found I was an economist, you don't have to know what the numbers are. You don't have to be able to guess what they are, like how many jobs or whatever metric you're looking at. Is it getting better, worse, or staying the same? And so I would add a second part to that. Is it getting better, worse, staying the same? Is it expected or unexpected? Those 2 things tell you what you need to know. And ADP gets a lot of attention on Wednesday and then gets forgotten about on Friday. Sorry, Neil, it's no knock on you. It's just everybody wants the next thing. CPI gets all the love in the world, and then PCE comes out like 2 weeks later, and we're not talking about CPI that much. It's what's new. We're very fickle that way. But what was scary about this is, so over the last year, if you look at the payroll survey, it's like 2 million jobs. You look at the household survey over the last year, and it's like 500,000 jobs added. It's like That's a big difference.
But the QCEW
Which
will re-look at those numbers again.
well, that's the re-benchmarking, and that's why you can see such massive adjustments. Which one is wrong? Well, that's what, which one is under or over counting and why? There are legitimate reasons sometimes. If more people are getting multiple jobs, the payroll survey is going to overcount, and that's not the survey's fault. For whatever reason, they can't make that adjustment. Or that, one of the things you see in the household survey is how many of the jobs are part-time. And it has been mostly part-time jobs, is what we've seen. So I think the way I look at it is I can look at the ADP number and go, okay, that was okay. You look at this number, the first thing I do is I see a blow-away payroll number is what did the household number say, right? Because the last month before, the last prior 2 months, October and November, remember October number was really low for payroll. It was like 12,000 because of the hurricanes and the Boeing strike.
Right.
So the household survey actually had negative job growth in October and November. So what was the December number? 478,000 jobs. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time wondering which one's right and which one's wrong. I'm going to say, all right, if they're both showing really high numbers, then it's a good number.
Yeah.
Now, what's going to happen when these numbers get, when the more thorough data comes out? Who knows? It could be an adjustment.
Yeah.
But what's more important is, what does this mean now? Because we joked about the 818,000 jobs that disappeared at the latest benchmark revisions. But what does that matter now? That's the thing. And, just to highlight some of the other things of this report, which make me feel good about it, it's really hard to find anything here that you don't like if you take the data as an accurate representation. Biggest employment gains in healthcare is one of them. That's government supported, but they're also, a lot of them are decent paying jobs, and they're entry level jobs for a lot of people. And we have an aging population, and it's good that we don't want to see a shortage of, home aides and nurses and doctors.
Right.
But retail up 43,000, that was great, and leisure and hospitality up 43,000. And again, in November, retail's employment showed a 29,000 job loss. So that's a nice recovery. Is some of that due to the way that they seasonally adjust for holiday workers? Well, we all know that they don't need as many people as they used to. When I worked at a Sam Goody in the 80s, we brought plenty of people in because that's the only way you're going to sell anything. But in an internet world, you don't necessarily need to hire. I assume that they make these adjustments every year. They put out these technical notes that I would never try to read about the adjustments that they do make. But the bottom line takeaway from this is most of the biggest gains were in private sector industries not supported by the government. That's good. We had pointed out the last couple of reports that it's not good that more than half of this increase is either government or government-supported industries. Right. So the more the private sector is fueling job growth, the more happy we are.
But there were a lot of part-time jobs that were factored into that as well, correct?
Yeah, and
I think a lot of jobs also were taken by people 24 years or younger as well, which isn't a great sign, but
well,
overall,
think about retail, right? It used to be, I started at Sam Goody, I was 16, right? You get your working papers, you go work in a mall or a fast food place. That's changed. Like you go into a mall or fast food, you see older people there than you would have expected 20, 30 years ago. But part of that too is the minimum wage increases have made these a lot more attractive jobs. And, has also raised the costs to eat at a lot of these establishments or shop in these stores.
Yeah.
And so another thing is the unemployment rate went down 0.1%. So that's good. When we see the unemployment rate, again, I see the headline number, I'm going to go to the household number, see what that says. It's like, all right, that's 478. It's like, wow, okay, that I feel good about that. Remember, the prior 2 months, it had a net loss of 619,000 jobs if you add them together. Another thing that I liked about it was the adjustments made to the prior 2 months' numbers were minimal.
Right.
less than 10,000 jobs net for 2 months.
Which is not the norm for what
we've
been seeing.
We've seen some tremendous adjustments. So when the unemployment rate goes down, what's the reason? There's two things that really move the unemployment rate: hiring / firing, and the labor force, right? So we look at the labor force participation rate, which is about 60 some odd %. That's the percentage of working age people that are either looking for work or not looking for work.
Yep.
So we look at that and say, did that dynamic change? Because the unemployment rate can go up in a good economy because more people are getting back to work. So that's good. All right, while my voice is disappearing, this would be a great time to take a break from our very good friends at CrossCountry Mortgage.
I'm Scott Nadler, one of the nation's top mortgage originators, and I'm here to help you take control of your mortgage. Ready to lower your payments or pull out cash for life's big moments? I've got the solutions you need. With over a decade of experience, I'll make your refinance a breeze from start to finish. Don't wait. Call me at CrossCountry Mortgage today, and let's start saving you money.
And we're back and almost in full voice. I'm going to let Scott do all the talking this segment. Another thing that's positive in this report is wages, up 0.3% and almost 4% year over year. That means wages still outpacing prices.
Yeah.
Good for the consumer, not great in the fight against inflation, right? Because more money chasing not enough goods.
Correct.
So,
which is what obviously us in the mortgage market are looking for. We're looking for that inflation number to start to come down. Reports like this do not help.
Well, it's funny because that was the only thing that they make estimates on that didn't beat estimates. It was a little below expected. So that's really good. But I mean, any way you look at this report, it's a blowaway number. It could change. You can be suspicious of it all you want. It comes on the back of another good number in November, at least in the headline number, which bounced back nicely after just 12,000 jobs in October. But there's also two other things that we found out last week. And we were talking about this before we came on set. Well, we can say that we're on set. Weekly jobless claims, which were never meant to be like an official statistic, but became very popular during COVID, fell to an 11-month low of just 201,000. That is unbelievably low. Typically you look for numbers approaching 300,000 before you start to worry, right, about the health of the labor market. And then you had an interesting take on this one. The number of job openings, which trails, this number is actually as of the end of November, actually rose to 8.1 million.
Yeah.
But you had
there was a great article that I came across in the Wall Street Journal, and this is the same day that the jobs report ultimately came out. And it said, fake job postings are becoming a real problem. That was the headline. If you look at this article, it says companies have a number of nefarious or normal reasons for posting not quite real jobs. They may want to suggest they're growing, even when they aren't, or may keep postings up in case they get a candidate who's too good to pass up. The postings add to a confounding market for workers. Economic data is pointing to healthy hiring, including the robust jobs numbers that showed 256,000 jobs were added in December. At the same time, white-collar workers say it's harder to get hired and blame everything from AI to tighter budgets.
Well, there was just an article that came out, too, last week that in the next 3 to 5 years, Wall Street is going to lose 200,000 jobs to AI. And that's like frightening here because, look, they're like 3% of the employment, but they make 20% of the money.
Right.
So when you hear stuff like that, it's frightening. But I also joke that there's people like me that leave a job posted online and I forget to take it down after I hire the person.
Right.
But
we talked about this also during COVID, where if someone is hiring, they can have multiple job postings in multiple states. Yeah. I'm only looking to hire one person, but that person can work from anywhere. I can put 20 job postings up, and that's counted as 20 job openings, when in reality, it's only one.
And this goes to the problem.
So this is skewing the numbers, which makes it very confusing to a lot of people.
Things not designed to be official-ish statistics are being relied on. I mean, job openings, this is about 20 years they've been doing this, and it lags tremendously, but it gives us some idea and these numbers are still way above where they are in a normal economy.
Yeah.
You know, at COVID, they peaked at, I think it was like 11 million or something like that. And a lot was made the prior couple of months that number was coming down. It's like, well, see, now nobody's hiring. I think that for some of the white collar workers you're talking about, it's not as easy to find a job.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the appropriate way to say it. Not that it's so much harder, it's just not as easy. When you looked at what the quit rates were and how often people were quitting without another job or quitting and getting very large increases in their pay.
Yeah.
Like that was not the norm. And now we're kind of normalizing again to what's still a very healthy labor market. And people it's like saying a 5% mortgage rate. Oh, this is terrible. Why isn't it 3? Right. 5's still great, especially,
now.
We'll get into that in a minute. All right. So me and Scott Nadler see this at the same time and we go, oh, great. Right away, you can forget about a rate cut this month, right? The Fed's meeting later this month. They're not going to do it. This goes to the problem of the Fed is doing something that I don't recall it ever doing. It cut rates a full % at the end of last year in a good economy. Why would you do that? Well, if you're really convinced there's danger in the next 6 months, you got to do it quickly because you can't wait till you have the problem. It's better to put the pre-emergent down in the spring so your whole lawn doesn't turn into crabgrass. Because if it does, trust me, when I moved into my house in May, they didn't put the pre-emergent in. And then in July, my whole lawn was crabgrass, which my neighbors felt very happy to point out to me and very angry at the same time.
Great story, Greg.
I try to relate everything to homes and lawns. So anyway, this is something we haven't experienced. Usually we're cutting rates in a bad economy. And every measure we look at, and we went over this in detail last week, GDP growing at a nice pace, consumers still spending, hiring still brisk, unemployment still low, stocks doing great. But
inflation, though,
inflation is the thing
that people feel.
So, no rate cut.
No.
Probably none in March. And we talked about last week, they were planning on doing 4 quarter-point ones or a full. Now everybody's saying 2 at most, maybe in the second half of the year, or 1 around mid-year and then another one. But they need to see more of a slowdown in hiring, and they need to see more improvement in the fight against inflation. Because now they've really backed themselves into a corner. Because now what do you do? Wall Street wants those rate cuts. And, Wall Street, I always say it's the bluntest thing in the world. So what happens immediately after these numbers come out? 10-year Treasury yields spike, which is the basis for mortgage rates, right? Which is bad. We don't want to hear that.
And it happens quickly, and we say it all the time. When numbers like this come out,
the Nadler rule.
The Nadler rule, rates go up very quickly. They go down very slowly. So, we see an immediate alert, and a lot of us subscribe to all these different services. And when a report like this comes out, your phone is blowing up from these alerts saying, lock in your rates, lock everything in. And, if you're good at this, you're preparing your clients for it. Either they know they're locked or they know that they're floating and why they're floating, why they aren't locked. So they could be prepared. And some of them have the stomach for it and some of them don't. Some of them just want to, know, here's my ceiling, here's where I can lock it in. Yes, there's a chance that rates can drop, but there's also a chance that they can also pop up.
And being prepared and informed is the key thing here. And understand, people.
It's everything.
Yeah, should know by now how, I think I'm an economist and 15 years ago, did I look at this data with so much anticipation? No.
Right.
Only, during the financial crisis, during COVID. But now this is something that is going to stick around a lot longer to worry about inflation and rates a lot longer than we thought.
Published rates are also lagging.
Okay.
So if someone Googled interest rates the same day the jobs numbers came out, they'd probably see a lower rate than where the market was because typically rates will get published by Freddie Mac every Wednesday.
Right.
So they're looking at Wednesday's rates.
Thursday.
Thursday
at noon.
So
which I can't stand because I write my blog on Thursday.
Yeah.
So I always like to get it done before lunch.
Mm.
And I can't because I can't see that mortgage rate.
Yes. So
These are the problems economists have. All the stuff we're talking about that's scaring people, these are the problems. Greg has to wait to eat. Trust me, I get hangry too.
That's a problem. Yeah.
So, this 10-year treasury's spiking. Mortgage rates are going to not necessarily spike, but they're going to go up. And they've already been going up. So that's the double up.
Yes.
And they did go up last week, although
did.
not a heck of a lot. But again, that came out on Thursday.
Yeah. Friday's
a whole different story.
Exactly.
So where are rates now relative to where they were before the jobs report? Do you have
By and large, rates were in the higher sixes. Now they're somewhere in the lower sevens. In some instances, you could still be in the lower sixes if it's a lower LTV, if it's a high credit score. But for the most part, you're seeing rates across the board somewhere in the lower sevens. Yeah.
Okay. See, and it shows you, again, for decades, we had a bull market in bonds.
Mm-hmm.
The rates were low, inflation was under control. Now it's like we can't remember that.
It's the perception, though, right? Last September, the Fed lowers rates by 50 basis points. The common sentiment around the country is that means mortgage rates are dropping.
By 50 basis?
By 50 basis points. So now they're seeing multiple rate cuts. They're seeing, and they're expecting mortgage rates to ultimately drop and follow, but that just hasn't been the case.
Right. And again, we talk about there's no direct relationship to what the Fed does and mortgage rates. And it can work the exact opposite, have the opposite effect. So
exactly,
it's hard. And also stocks got crushed on Friday and, we had a bad week. Now, this week, our buddies, the PI brothers, show up and retail sales. So we'll see how that worked out. Online spending was up. I think it was 9% according to Adobe, who looks at this stuff year over year. So that's good. We talked about how people had planned to spend more money, even though they were still paying off last year's bills.
Right.
It's kind of like The Big Short when, they start looking at these individual mortgages in the tranches and they're like, what?
Yep.
And then they go visit these houses and it's like they're all abandoned. And
yep.
Yeah, it's pretty unbelievable that my son was born right in the middle of the financial crisis in August of 2007. In fact, I wanted to refer to him as financial crisis. But when he would wake me up in the middle of the night, that gave me a chance to read more of this scary stuff. And people want you to explain this as an economist. And it's like, well, let's see, the last time this bad happened was the Great Depression. I wasn't around then, so I'm going to have to get back to you. And we didn't have mortgage-backed securities back then.
I like the opening of that when Ryan Gosling, he's doing the voiceover, and he just says, he talks about the people that bet against what was happening. And he says, these guys did something that no one else did. They looked. That's all they did. They just looked. Housing
was the gold standard for investment, and it is proven to be a very good, stable investment. But when you start changing the rules dramatically and you hear things like ninja loans.
Correct.
I was trying to explain this to my son because I said, you should watch.
Appraisals.
Right. Yeah. No appraisals needed. I was trying to explain because Christian Bale's character in the movie is a heavy metal enthusiast. I said, he walks in one time and Master of Puppets is playing and one time he's playing drums. I don't know what song that is. So, of course, Gregory goes on his phone. He goes, it's a Pantera song. I'm like, you expect me to know that? I probably should because it's of my generation, but I never got into Pantera. But now we're facing, I always say Wall Street screws up once a decade, like really bad. You think of the savings and loan crisis, the tech bubble bursting. You think about mortgage-backed securities, CDOs, all that stuff. They find a way to almost ruin our financial system once a decade. You got to count on that. But housing, this is a different challenge. This can't be fixed by a government bailout or changes of rules and stuff like that. This is getting inflation out of the economy. So you had talked about buy downs becoming popular. Mm-hmm. So now that we're expecting rates to go even higher, what is that? Do you see any other products becoming popular or it's just going to be more of the same for now?
I think it's more of the same for now. Again, I think as the Fed starts to cut rates, you'll see that spread between ARMs and fixed rates widen a bit. So ARMs will start becoming more attractive. There are also lenders who we work with who may only have ARMs, and their ARMs are very attractive.
And what are the time periods before these rates adjust? What are your options?
5, 7, or 10 years. So you could have a rate, let's say on average, if we're doing ARM, someone will take a 7-year ARM. Statistically speaking, people hold on to they'll pay off their loan, sell, or refinance every 6.5 years. That's on average around the country. So a 7-year ARM, your rate's locked in from now until 2032. You can refinance, you can pay off the loan, you can sell the property at any point in that time frame. There are no prepayment penalties. Those are attractive options.
And again,
and oftentimes right now, those rates could be almost 1% lower than where the market is. With some of these boutique lenders who we work with. If you're looking at straight Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, they're not all that attractive right now. They're in line with a 30-year fixed.
Okay. No,
so these are portfolio lenders that are not selling their loans to Fannie Mae.
And this is why it's important to speak to a professional and know what your options are. Again, it's not a 30-year fixed or bust. There are other options there.
With the 30-year fixed, though, as we've talked about, there's also these temporary buy downs where you could do like a 2-1 buy down, where if the rate's 7% for the first year, your rate's 5%. For the second year, your rate's 6%, and then the third year goes up to 7%. So for 2 years, you're gonna have a below market interest rate.
What's the cost of that roughly? Is it a percentage of the loan?
So whatever that difference is, let's say the difference between 7% and 5% on the loan, let's just make up a number. Let's say it's $15,000. And the difference between 7% and 6% is $10,000. So total, that's $25,000.
Right.
That's paid for by the seller, though.
Okay.
Paid by the seller, the builder, a developer. Now, why would they do that? Could be on a listing that just hasn't sold, or a developer that is looking to push property in a tight market. Yeah. So those are attractive options that we see often.
Well, it's frightening for the average home buyer. I was just talking to somebody here today who's lamenting, and it's something that so many people in their 20s and 30s say, like, how am I ever going to be able to afford a home?
People like to complain to you.
Well, because I'm the economist. They think I could just go like that and the rates. So it's, again, we're like Oprah. You get a mortgage, you get a mortgage, you get a mortgage. Actually, Scott should be the one saying this.
I wish it was that simple.
There's that, look under your chair, there's a mortgage, right? She always does that. So I think it's, the inflation, anything you look at, food is it's such a necessity. And housing are such a huge part of this, and why these numbers won't come down. I'm starting to feel like an idiot because we were talking about the housing numbers and the 6-month intervals that they calculate them, and you would have figured by now you would have seen more easing in housing prices, but it's not happening. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that is due to the way they calculate it. But even if you look at the existing home sales numbers, the sales picked up temporarily because of the rate cuts. The mortgage rate went down last year through like the beginning of October and got to almost under 6%. So that's why, again, you're going to see some numbers coming out for December for home sales are going to look good. And it's like, no, that's based on what the rates were then.
Correct.
So I think, it's tough. And but you still see, even when home sales slow, prices aren't coming down. And that's the thing. And here in Manhattan, we've seen a great burst of activity. I just did the contract sign numbers for last week. Holidays always shut the whole thing down. Compared to last year, they looked okay. But this year was like a rocket to the moon. And it was cold last week.
We've been busier than we would expect around this time. Rents are obviously elevated as well.
Right,
which
rents
contributes to it.
Are not coming down. Especially in a city where, depending on the borough, but on average, about 70% of the people are renting, shows you there's not a lot of housing you can buy to begin with. Mm-hmm. And it makes it even harder when, the rates are high. But again, I shouldn't say rates are high. I get yelled at for saying that because it's not true. Historically, they're still
Edit
low.
that out.
I'm going to duck as people shoot at me. But, again, the average 30-year rate typically hovers about 7.7, 7.8. So I'm not saying we should enjoy that we're below there, because I understand that, we were looking at just a couple of months ago, it seems, rates were sitting at 6%, just a tick up, and then people were still waiting, and we said on the show, what are you waiting for? That's why trying to time the rate and trying to time a price are things you just can't do.
Right.
Those geniuses on Wall Street don't get it right most of the time. And I think that we have to remember that how long-term, I know you say that on average people move, but a lot of people also keep their homes for very long periods of time. I've been in mine now for 18 years. And
no, but you haven't had the same mortgage for 18 years.
No, because I when I bought my home, mortgages were 6.5, I think. And yeah, I was one of those people got, something in the low 3s and very happy with
That's
that.
the thing. So every 6.5
But
years,
that
someone would do
happened over a
something with
period.
their loan.
Right. That happened over a period of a long time.
Yeah.
It wasn't like I got 6.5 and then next year I had 5.5 and it just kept going down.
Of course. Yeah.
It's also, if you try to find a complete bottom, as you just saw at the end of last year, you could easily miss it.
And there are opportunities in the market for people now. As we've talked about, the NAR came out and they said for every 1% drop in rate, that deems 5 million people eligible for a mortgage. That creates a lot more competition. That's going to drive prices up even further. So I don't know when that's going to happen, when rates will drop to that degree, but there are definitely opportunities now for people. And if you see a listing that's been sitting for a long time, you can negotiate. Have the seller give you a credit.
Now's a good time.
More of a buyer's market.
Now, we said it last week, I believe. Now's a good time because it's the stuff that's been sitting on that didn't sell during the peak selling season. A lot more competition is in the pipeline for the spring season. Now's when you have your greatest negotiability on price. So if you don't like the rate, you might be able to make some of that up on price. And as Scott always points out, people overestimate what 25 basis points means in a monthly payment or even 50 basis points. It doesn't mean your payment's double.
Right.
And I think getting all those facts and numbers are the way to go.
Exactly. Agreed.
All right.
What do you really need to know about buying or selling a home? First, it's serious business. And it's complicated. There's a lot of money on the table, and emotion too. You need an agent who knows the ropes. So, whether you're buying or selling your home, work with professionals who have a mastery of the craft.
Exactly. Agreed.
All right, we ran a little long this week, although I think we got a little crazy with those numbers there on the clock. If you ever wonder why I keep looking up, I'm obsessed with the clock here, figuring that we're going too long, no one's going to listen. Whereas I'm told if it's too long, people won't even start it because they just don't want to commit. But then I look at how long people actually watch this, and I said, they're not committing. It's like any other podcast. But that's it. I thought it was a pretty good show. It's always good to have Scott on because he brings a perspective. Plus he's talking about money and borrowing money. I'm just throwing a bunch of numbers at you. So, the money talks.
People like me for my money.
I like you for who you are. You're an interesting guy.
Thank you. Thank you, Greg.
Hey, I just say that because you're a sponsor. Anyway, that's it.
I'll take it.
Yeah, I take whatever compliments I can get. As we always mention, guests of the show get provided with lunch compliments of our good buddies at Canaletto, where we're off to as soon as we finish this. So by the time you watch this, you'll know that we were there on Monday eating lunch. Again, I'm usually there anyway, so you can find me. So, Canaletto's on 208 East 60th Street. Great Italian food, great service. And I'm usually hiding in one of the corners there. So you can come and harass me.
One of the corners? I think you have your seat.
I have my seat, yes.
Yeah.
Don't ask for my table. You're not kidding.
Right.
Unless you flash a lot of money, then you might. But thanks to Lena and Ray, as always, and Scott, and to all of the supporters out there that tune in and listen. The numbers have been great again. And now that we're in our second season.
Episode 50.
Episode 50. We're going to have to work on new plot twists, add new characters, treat it like a soap opera. But luckily, the economy is providing so much action and things to be scared about.
Unfortunately.
The show writes itself. Anyway, well, that is our show. Again, happy birthday to my brother Chris and anybody else celebrating birthdays. And have a great week, everybody.